Back. So I left off where, quick recap of what I read yesterday. Walt finally got all the scoop. Nah, he can finally stay out of the operation, I guess, national defense that Lem and his team has going on. With Walt not knowing everything that's going on, in order for him, the agreement for staying out of the operation is for him to be kept in the loop of what's going on. So he feels like he's doing something or like playing a part, because it's his duty to take care of his people and keep them protected. And I got my time management has been off the rocks. It's been horrible. Wait, what's the time? 30 minutes. 10:15. Damn, I forgot where I was at. Oh, crap. I forgot the timer's still going on, so even if I pause it to then where am It was entirely outside of creation, a thing apart, an abomination, though no one actually said as much. And the thing was aware of its status as an outsider, acutely aware. Why not just call it the baboon? Because it doesn't really look much of anything like a baboon anymore. Not like anything you've ever seen, except in a nightmare. Walt did not like the expression on his friend's dark face, in his eyes. He decided not to ask for a better description of the outsider. Perhaps that was something he did not need to know. Instead, he said, "What about the Huston? What about the Huston? Weatherby and Yarbeck murders? Who was behind all that? We don't know the man who pulled the trigger, but we know the Soviets hired him. They also killed another Bernardine man who was on vacation in Acapulco. This reminds me, man, I haven't read about Vince in a minute. Walt felt as if he were jolting through one of those invisible barriers again into an even more complicated world. Soviets? Were we talking about the Soviets? How'd they get into the act? We didn't think they knew about the Francis Project, Lem said, but they did. Apparently, they even had a mole inside Banadine who reported out to them on our progress. When the dog and subsequently the outsider escaped, the mole informed the Soviets, and evidently the Soviets decided to take advantage of the chaos and do us even more damage. They killed every project leader, Yarbek and Weatherby and Haynes, plus Huston, who had once been a project leader but no longer worked at Bernardine. We think they did this for two reasons. First, to bring the Francis Project to a halt. Second, to make it harder for us to track down the outsider. How would that make it harder? How would that make it harder? Lem slumped in his seat as if in talking of the crisis, he was more clearly aware of the burden on his shoulders. By eliminating Huston, Haynes, and especially Weatherby and Yarbek, the Soviets cut us off from the people who would have the best idea how the outsider and the dog think. The people best able to figure out where those animals might go and how they might be recaptured. Have you actually pinned it on the Soviets? Lem sighed. Not entirely. I'm focused primarily on recovering the dog and the outsider. So we have another entire task force trying to track down the Soviet agents behind the murders, arson, and data hijacking. Unfortunately, the Soviets seem to have used freelance hitmen outside of their own network, so we have no idea where to look for the triggerman. That side of the investigation is pretty much stalled, and the fire at Bernardine a day or so later, well, definitely arson, another Soviet action. It destroyed all the paper and electronic files on the Francis Project. There were backup computer disks at another location, of course, but data on them has somehow. There were backup computer disks at another location, of course, but data on them has somehow been erased. The Soviets again? We think so. The leaders of the Francis Project and all their files have been wiped out, leaving us in the dark when it comes to trying to figure out how either the dog or the outsider might think, where they might go, how they might be tricked into captivity. Walt shook his head. Never thought I'd be on the side of the Russians, but putting a stop to this project seems like a good idea. They're far from innocent. From what I hear, they've got a similar project underway at laboratories in the Ukraine. I wouldn't doubt we're working diligently to destroy their files and people the way they've destroyed ours. Anyway, the Soviets would like nothing better than for the outsider to run wild in some nice, peaceable suburb, gutting housewives and chewing the heads off little kids. Because if that happens a couple of times, well, then the whole thing's going to blow up in our face. Chewing the heads off little kids? Jesus. Walt shuddered and said, is that likely to happen? We don't believe so. The outsider is aggressive as hell. It was designed to be aggressive after all. And it has a special hatred for its markers, which is something Yarbek didn't count on and something she hoped to be able to correct in future generations. The outsider takes great pleasure in slaughtering us, but it's also smart, and it knows that every killing gives us a new fix on its whereabouts. So it's not going to indulge its hatred too often. It's going to stay away from people most of the time, moving mainly at night. Once in a while, out of curiosity, it might poke into residential areas along the edge of the developed eastern flank of the county, as it did at the Keishan place. Yeah, as it did at the Keishan place. As it did at the Keishan place. Yeah, but I bet it didn't go there to kill anyone. Just plain curiosity. It doesn't want to be caught before it accomplishes its main goal, which is finding and killing the dog, Lem said. Wall was surprised. Why would it care about the dog? We don't really know, Lem said. But Benodine, it harbored a fierce hatred of the dog, worse than what it felt toward people. When Yarbik worked with it, constructing sign language with which to communicate complex ideas, the outsiders several times expressed a desire to kill and mutilate the dog, but it will never explain why. It was obsessed with the dog. So you think now it's tracking the retriever? Yes, because evidence seems to indicate that the dog was the first to break out of the labs that night in May. Because evidence seems to indicate that the dog was the first to break out of the labs that night in May, and that its escape drove the outsider mad. The outsider was kept in a large enclosure inside Yarbek's lab, and everything belonging to it, bedding, many educational devices, toys, was torn and smashed to pieces. Why? Then, apparently, realizing that the dog was going to be forever out of its reach if it didn't make good its own escape. Then apparently realizing that the dog was going to be forever out of its reach if it didn't make good its own escape, the outsider put its mind to the problem, and by God found its own way out. But if the dog got a good head start, there's a link between the dog and the outsider that no one understands. A mental link. Instinctual awareness. We don't know its extent, but we can't rule out the possibility that this link is strong enough for one of them to follow the other over considerable distances. It's apparently a sort of mild sixth sense that was somehow a bonus of the technique of intelligence enhancement used in both Weatherby's and the Yarbek's research. But we're only guessing. We don't really know for sure. There's so fucking much we don't know. Both men were silent for a while. The humid closeness of the car was no longer entirely unpleasant. Given all the dangers loose in the modern world, these steamy confines seemed safe and comfortable. A haven. Finally, not wanting to ask any more questions, afraid of the answers he might get, Walt nevertheless said, Benodine is a high security building. It's designed to keep unauthorized people from getting in, but it must be hard to get out of the place too. Yet, both the dog and the outsider escaped. Yes. And obviously, no one ever figured they could, which means they're both smarter than anyone realized. Yes, Walt said. In the case of the dog, well, if it's smarter than anyone figured, so what? The dog is friendly. The dog is friendly, man. Who had been the dog is friendly, Lem. The dog is friendly, Lem, who had been staring at the opaque windshield, finally met Walt's eyes. That's right. That's right. But if the outsider is smarter than we thought, if it's very nearly as smart as a man, then catching it's going to be even harder. Very nearly. Or I mean, if the outsider is smarter than we thought, if it's very nearly as smart as a man, then catching is going to be even harder. Very nearly or as smart as a man. No, impossible. Or even smarter. Well said. No, that couldn't be. Couldn't. No, definitely couldn't. Definitely couldn't. That couldn't be. Couldn't. No, definitely couldn't. Definitely couldn't. Lem sighed, wearily rubbed his eyes and said nothing. He was not going to start lying to his best friend again. 7. Nora and Travis went through the photographs one by one, learning a little more about Einstein. By barking once or vigorously wagging his tail, the dog answered questions and was able to confirm that he had chosen the advertisements for computers because they reminded him of the computers in the lab where he had been kept. The photo of 4 young people playing with the striped beach ball appealed to him because one of the scientists in the lab had evidently used balls of various sizes in an intelligence test that Einstein had particularly enjoyed. They were unable to determine the reason for his interest in the parrot, the butterflies, Mickey Mouse, and many other things, but that was only because they could not hit upon the pertinent yes or no questions that would have led to explanations. Even when 100 questions failed to reveal the meaning of one of the photographs, the 3 of them remained excited and delighted by the process of discovery, for they met with success in enough cases to make the effort worthwhile. The only time the mood changed for the worse was when they queried Einstein about the magazine picture of the demon from an upcoming horror movie. He became queried. What does queried mean? Queried? Queried. To ask questions. Query. They queried Einstein about the magazine picture of the demon from an upcoming horror movie. He became extremely agitated. He tucked his tail between his legs, bared his teeth, growled deep in his throat. Several times he padded away from the photograph, going behind the sofa or into another room where he stayed for a minute or two before returning reluctantly to face additional questions, and he shivered almost continuously when quizzed about the demon. Finally, after trying for at least 10 minutes to determine the reason for the dog's dread, Travis pointed to a slab-jawed, wickedly fanged, luminous-eyed movie monster and said, "Maybe you don't understand, Einstein. This isn't a picture of a real living thing. This is a make-believe demon from a movie. Do you understand what I mean when I say make-believe?" Einstein wagged his tail. "Yes. Well, this is a make-believe monster. One bark? No. Make-believe. Phony, not real, just a man in a rubber suit, Nora said. No. Yes, Travis said. No. Einstein tried to run off behind the sofa again, but Travis grabbed him by the collar and held him. Are you claiming to have seen such a thing? The dog raised his gaze from the picture, looked into Travis's eyes, shuddered and whimpered. The pitiful note of profound fear in Einstein's soft whine and an indescribably disturbing quality in his dark eyes combined to affect Travis to an extent that surprised him. Holding the collar with one hand, his other hand on Einstein's back, Travis felt the shivers that quaked through the dog, and suddenly he was shivering too. The dog's stark fear was transmitted to him, and he thought crazily, by God, he really has seen something like this. Sensing the change in Travis, Nora said, "What's wrong?" Instead of answering her, he repeated the question that Einstein had not yet answered. Are you claiming to have seen such a thing? Yes. Something that looks exactly like this demon? A bark and a wag. Yes and no. Something that looks at least a little bit like it? Yes. Letting go of the collar, Travis stroked the dog's back, trying to soothe him, but Einstein continued to shiver. Is this why you keep a watch at the window some nights? Yes. Clearly puzzled and alarmed by the dog's distress, Nora began to pet him too. I thought you were worried that people from the lab would find you, Einstein barked once. You're not afraid people from the lab will find you. You're not afraid people from the lab will find you? Yes and no, Travis said. But you're more afraid that this other thing will find you. Yes. Is this the same thing that was in the woods that day? The thing that chased us? The thing I shot at? Travis asked. Yes. Travis looked at Nora. She was frowning, but it's only a movie monster. Nothing in the real world looks even a little bit like it. Padding across the room, sniffing at the assorted photographs, Einstein paused again at the Blue Cross ad that featured the doctor, mother, and the baby in a hospital room. He brought the magazine to them and dropped it on the floor. He put his nose to the doctor in the picture, then looked at Nora, at Travis, put his nose to the doctor again, and looked up expectantly. Before, Nora said, you told us the doctor represented one of the scientists in that lab. Yes, Travis said. So are you telling me the scientist who worked on you would know what this thing in the woods was? Yes. Einstein went looking through the photographs again, and this time he returned with the ad that showed a car in a cage. He touched his nose to the cage. Then, hesitantly, he touched his nose to the picture of the demon. Are you saying the thing in the woods belongs in a cage? Nora asked. Yes. More than that, Travis said. I think he's telling us that it was in a cage at one time, that he saw it in a cage. Yes. In the same lab where you were in a cage? Yes. Another experimental lab animal? Nora asked. Yes. Travis stared hard at the photograph of the demon, at its thick brow and deeply set yellow eyes, at its deformed snout-like nose and mouth bristling with teeth. At last he said, was it an experiment that went wrong? Yes and no, Einstein said. Now, at a peak of agitation, the dog crossed the living room to the front window, jumped up and braced his forepaws on the sill. and peered out at the Santa Barbara evening. Nora and Travis sat on the floor among the opened magazines and books, happily with the progress they had made, beginning to feel the exhaustion that their excitement had masked and frowning at each other in puzzlement. She spoke softly. Do you think Einstein's capable of lying? Making up wild stories like children do? I don't know. Can dogs lie, or is that just a human skill? He laughed at the absurdity of his own question. Can dogs lie? Can a moose be elected to the presidency? Can cows sing? Nora laughed. Nora laughed too, and very prettily. Never heard of that. I've never heard of that word. Prettily? She laughs pretty? How do you even laugh pretty? Prettily. Oh, doing something that an attractive, pleasing, or okay, so having like a nice smile. You know what I'm saying? Prettily. Wow.
Prettily.
And very prettily. Can ducks tap dance? In a fit of silliness that was a reaction to the difficulty of dealing intellectually and emotionally with the whole idea of a dog as smart as Einstein, Travis said, I once saw a duck tap dancing. Oh yeah? Yeah, in Vegas. Laughing, she said, what hotel was he performing at? Caesar's Palace. He could sing too. The duck? Yeah. Ask me his name. What was his name? Sammy Davis Duck Jr. Sammy Davis Duck Jr., Travis said, and he laughed again. He was such a big star, they didn't even have to put his entire name on the marquee. I think it's marquee. Marquee. Not Marquette.
Marquee.
On the marquee for people to know who was performing there. They just put Sammy. Huh? No, just Junior. They just put Sammy? Huh? No, just Junior. Einstein returned from the window and stood watching them, his head cocked, trying to figure out why they were acting so peculiar. The puzzled expression on the retriever's face struck both Travis and Nora as the most comical thing they had ever seen. They leaned on each other, held each other, and laughed like fools with the snore of derision. The retriever went back to the window. As they gradually regained control of themselves and as their laughter subsided, Travis became aware that he was holding Nora, that her head was on his shoulder, that the physical contact between them was greater than they had allowed themselves before. Her hair smelled clean, fresh. He could feel the body heat pouring off her. Suddenly, he wanted her desperately, and he knew he was going to kiss her when she raised her head from his shoulder. A moment later, she looked up, and he did what he knew he'd do. He kissed her, and she kissed him. For a second or two, she did not seem to realize what was happening, what it meant. Briefly, it was without significance, sweet and utterly innocent, not a kind of passion, but a friendship and great affection. Then the kiss changed, and her mouth softened. She began to breathe faster, and her hand tightened on his arm, and she tried to pull him closer. A low murmur of need escaped her, and the sound of her own voice brought her to her senses. Abruptly, she stiffened with complete awareness of him as a man, and her beautiful eyes were wide with wonder and fear at what had almost happened. Travis instantly drew back because he knew inst- inst- instinctive he knew instinctively that the time was not right, not yet perfect. When at last they did make love, it must be exactly right, without hesitation or distraction, because from the rest of their lives they would always remember their first time, and the memory should be all bright and joyous, worth taking out and examining 1,000 times as they grew old together. Although it was not quite time to put their future into words and confirm it with vows, Travis had no doubt that he and Nora Devon would be spending their lives with each other. And he realized that subconsciously he'd been aware of this inevitably for at least the past few days. After a moment of awkwardness, as they drew apart and tried to decide whether to comment on the sudden change in their relationship, Nora finally said, "He's still at the window." Einstein pressed his nose to the glass, staring out at the night. Could he be telling the truth? Nora wondered. Could there have been something else that escaped from the lab? Something that bizarre? If they had a dog as smart as him, I guess they might have other things even more peculiar. And there was something in the woods that day. But there's no danger of it finding him, surely. Not after you brought him this far north. No danger, Travis agreed. I don't think Einstein understands how far we came from where I found him. Whatever was in the woods wouldn't track him down now. But I'll bet the people from that lab have mounted one hell of a search. It's them I'm worried about. And so is Einstein, which is why he usually at being a dumb dog and plays at being a dumb dog in public and reveals his intelligence only private to me and now you. He doesn't want to go back. Nora said. If they find him, they won't. But if they do, what then? I'll never give him up, Travis said. Never. All right, I'm going to leave it right there. That's the reading for today. So a quick recap of what I just read. What? Now understand that what's going on is way more complex than he thought it would be. He now understands that the outsider really hates Einstein with so much passion, and it will not stop until it gets its hand on Einstein, which is what Lem was telling Walt, and with also the murders of all the scientists, whether it be Yarbeck, Dr. Davis, what's that name? Can't be. It was Weatherby. No, Davis Weatherby. Weatherby, Yarbeck. Yarbeck were like the two main scientists, but there was another scientist which I forgot. Also, the murders of the two scientists that I forgot. But yeah, Lem was telling him that it's way more complex than it actually was, and his men were on it. Also read a little bit about Travis, Nora, and Einstein, they're making progress with the dog, even more progress with the dog. And Travis and Nora kissed. They're getting closer with each other. And they're getting closer with each other in terms of establishing a relationship, which they, I guess, already have. But like now it's like getting physical now, I guess. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but yeah, Travis and Nora are falling for each other. I mean, they were already before, but like now it's getting a little bit serious. But yeah, they kissed. It was a little bit awkward after, but I don't know if this is a prediction, but there will be many more between them both. But yeah, that's a little bit of what I read today. That's a little recap of what I read today.